So our guest today is Gary Cowan. Welcome to the podcast. And why don't you give me a 30-second intro of who you are, what your background is?
Hi, yeah, my name's Gary Cowan. I'm head of digital construction for an Irish design and build contractor that work in the UK market, and we do a lot of DFMA, and we're heavily invested in digital construction. So it's full cycle BIM really from start to finish, from conception to completion, and all into FM management. We have an FM side of the business as well, and then when we're using point cloud technology, so we're scanning the as-built finished article, and we're matching our digital models to be as close as humanly possible.
So it sounds like you've been doing this for quite a while. How did you get into BIM?
I did a degree in Belfast at the university here in Queens, and back then there was no BIM, it was just mechanical engineering. I'd sort of done and had a lot of 3D experience using like SolidWorks, sort of graduated and went into the building services side of it, and I'm a experience. I noticed how very loose the buildings were designed. It was sort of throw it in and would sort of document it later, and I didn't really understand that, and we try and segment it and look at it from a pre-construction point of view, lateral frames to bring services down corridors or risers, heavy plant areas that require pumps and skids, and then our QA teams are watching closely with the iPads with augmented reality to make sure all the sections of pipe and ductwork are fitting as it's intended, and recording any deviations in using our point cloud technology. Then so you touch on 10 different sort of technologies really from start to finish.
So you've got a wide breadth of experience. What we want to do is we want to break down and diagnose some of the issues that you've had on previous projects. So you talked about the herbal house. Can you tell me about some of the nightmares that you had on that project?
Herbal House was done many years ago now. At that stage, I was actually sort of subcontracted into Kane as a freelance sort of BIM guy. BIM was very much in its infancy and only really being used as a coordination tool rather than the broad brush that it is today. And a lot of assumptions had been made about this particular building and the structural members of the beams in the basement. And
Sure.
a 3D model was kind of commissioned based on an assumption of the depth of the beams, and a full 3D model was made.
So with you're saying there's a lot of assumptions made with the existing structure. Where did the information come from before starting to generate the model that you were going to work on and clash against?
To be fair, I think it was a breakdown of the management on it, and there was probably drawings available that showed the depths of the beam, but he maybe looked at one or two beams and he made the assumption that every beam was exactly the same, and he modeled a very intricate MEP model based on this assumption, and all of the ductwork was fabricated and all the cable tray was purchased and ready to go, and then when the crew landed on site and inspected the site on the first day, and cable tray running into the steel, and we've got ductwork running into the steel, and everyone was starting to scratch their heads. It was a panic station moment that there was no turning back, so everybody was pulled off site. I had to spend 3 days basically hand surveying each and every beam, measuring it with a laser measure, while one of the machines was jackhammering. I had the big earphones on with a laptop on site with Revit trying to understand this structural model. The rule there was bad implementation of Revit is a nightmare. It really is a nightmare. It's a powerful tool, but it's like every tool, if you don't read it correctly, you don't get the full benefit from it.
Right. So that sounded like that was a very intense learning opportunity, not make assumptions, which I know we all do it. I'm guilty of it for sure. But what types of things do you need to look for? What was the process that you guys needed to take since materials were already ordered? Things were already showing up on site. You had people standing there to install.
Yeah, we had this sort of catalog what we had in terms of section duct lengths and widths, and I had to sort of keep a checklist of trying to use the same amount of fittings in the redesign. Then a lot of the electronics actually changed from being pulled cables. We actually ended up having to use like a buzz bar system to be able to produce the ups and downs that were required to traverse the site. It ended up costing a bit more money in the materials and stuff, but ultimately I think we saved a lot of time on the install because you couldn't physically bend the cables and achieve ceiling heights, for example. That was one of those ones that we were glad to see the back of it once it was done, but ultimately looking back on that particular project, there was a lot of blood, sweat and tears and lessons learned.
A project that I had where the ceiling heights, there was like 15 inches between ceiling and structure, and we needed to get 4-inch feeders, which obviously wasn't going to happen. And so we ended up converting a portion of it to a bus bar.
The early capture is key with all these things, early consideration.
We talked a little bit about what went wrong, like some of the assumptions. What kind of things would you work with on a junior technician? how can we break this down into chunks that the public can go, shoot, I heard this on this podcast. Now I need to make sure that I'm asking the right questions or doing a little QA/QC before we make that next step.
But the thing I would sort of stress for everyone at the minute is to try and always consider everybody else around you and what they require. So if you're an architect, they focus primarily on the beauty of the building, and they don't think of the function. So they're just assuming things can be buried in walls when they really can't. So we've started using XR technology, but when you come and you meet in a VR environment and you bring everyone in, and the architect can see from the MEP perspective what we're trying to model, and see that they have to show their entire ceiling makeup, and they have to show all the structural members, and low grade LOD modeling becomes an issue when you're trying to fabricate directly from Revit, and everyone in the team around you is only using hatches and plan view, for example, for a ceiling type, and aren't actually physically showing the ceiling in 3D. So starting to see the rise of all these CDs, although we can look at the modeling in the nth degree, and it's trousers down modeling. If you're showing rough modeling and work modeling, it becomes a harder for the rest of the team around you to produce good content and good designs.
So with that, do you think it's a lack of understanding of the program where they'll just throw annotations in? Do you think it's a lack of time, lack of budget?
People holding on to traditional workflows. Maybe some people that are 20 years using AutoCAD, and with the thought of trying to go into Revit, they're very precious about all of the blocks they've made, and they've got a library of work, and they've got a workflow that they've been using for well over a decade or more, and it's just understandable, but it's sort of short-sighted. And I speak in universities here often, and I talk to one student, and he's working for a company like Kane that are really space age, and he's using Revit, and he's doing all these crazy things. And then you speak to his colleague who's working at an older guy's solo practice, and he's still using AutoCAD blocks from 1988, and he's struggling. And these two guys are going to expect to be leaving the university shoulder to shoulder the same, but they aren't in reality, because one will be proficient in the technology and the other one will just really be slow blind a lot of it. So it's incumbent on the educational practices to stay up to speed. I suppose over time that'll naturally fade away as everyone becomes digitally proficient. The cost of all of this stuff is extreme, but it's a huge amount of money to invest for small businesses. They're maybe only doing a couple of projects a year.
What do you think it would be the best way to help push these solutions more to market? How we can help make this accessible to smaller companies so that they can realize the importance and the benefit of BIM?
It's hard to know. Like a government-led scheme that it mandates it, but then it also perhaps offers some sort of tax rebate or to try and make this thing mainstream. You'd have to try and push it on to the companies that kind of have to do it, but then also reimburse them if they do, and offer training and support, and lean on the international community. Certainly over here in UK and Ireland, we're very, very good at it, and it's usually most things are done via the BIM route now, and there is a wealth of knowledge across the world now of loads of professionals. So it's like a technological arms race, really, when it comes to the building side of it. Who can build the buildings quicker and faster and more efficiently and make the most money out of it. So you're only going to be able to do that with a modern method of construction, and if you're still floundering with 1980s technology, you're not going to win.
Yeah. All right. Well, so the next question that I have for you, what is the one Revit or BIM, VDC, Navisworks plugin that you cannot live without?
I've recently stumbled across a new plugin for Navisworks, which is the coordination tool, which sort of has now unlocked us the ability to directly open a project in Navisworks from ACC. Previously, it was taking us a number of hours to get a federated Navisworks out of a project, and now literally we can file save as an NWD, make joke about 10 or 15 minutes. So that came out of the blue. One of my colleagues, Shay Dominic, found it recently there and pointed it out to me, and it works across every year. Despite your Revit project can be in any year, as long as you've got a coordination space set up on your ACC, you can literally open your project in seconds. So we're quite chuffed for that one.
Excellent. Yeah. And then the other great thing about it too is your owners, field team, whoever can access that through the web then as well, and be able to at least fly around a little bit and see what's kind of all going on.
What it does is it allows us to open it in Navisworks and do our normal clash detections. And I used to have a Dynamo script that inserted like an orb in the model. Because it's now in the ACC environment, the Navisworks can all be created as issues. And now with the new Workshop XR platform that was just introduced, I can literally stick my VR headset on and pull up the exact list of clashes and go to each one digitally and stand in VR and look at it and go, yep, okay, I can see what needs done there. It's a completely unique way to consume the models, and the improved workflow speed from finding a mistake to bringing a technician beside you to say there's the answer. That's easy track with the issue system and ACC. It's phenomenal.
Another question that I haven't heard: what would be your walk-up music? What would be the music bumping, get you energized? Let's go! I'm gonna come out. And I'm gonna clash the hell out of this.
I wish you'd let me think about this one, because I've tried to pick a really epic track to walk into. I'm quite into the dance music, and also I'm sure it would be some sort of European pumping EDM dance track. It would be with
we'll get a little
give me the exact one. I'll have to think about it. Yeah,
awesome.
Yes, it's like my recent post there about the analogy that I use. Some people say, when you are head of digital construction and how do you explain that? An analogy I always say is that the construction is like a nightclub and everyone is dancing. I'm the DJ basically. I control the music, the tempo, and you have to read the room. That's the whole thing. You might play a song and nobody likes it and everyone stops, and then you go, right, okay, we'll have to change that. And that's the same in workflows and technologies. You can throw the best tool out to people. If they don't get it, if they don't understand your vision or what you can't do with it or how it works, it just falls flat. So if the people with the tools in their hands can't use them, it's a waste of time. I got really good at Revit for a while, and then I realized quickly that it didn't matter if the BIM team were amazing. The company's only succeed if we all buy into it. So it was a wider arm reach around everyone, and then saying, right, let's look at do it this way. So that's the analogy I use. Yeah.
The last thing I'm going to ask as well is, what is your mic drop moment? What is the one critical piece of advice that you would like to share with our audience?
You have to take immense pride in what you do. I call it peacocking. As a young guy watching Premier League football here in the UK, I grew up supporting Manchester United. They had a French player called Eric Cantona, and he was a really extravagant player. And he used to just walk onto the pitch. He used to just put his collar up, stretch his chest out and put the collar up, and then that started him playing, and people just watch him. So I tell them all to just step onto the field and park their chest out and put the collar up and be proud of what you can do if you have the ability and the courage to do it. And let me just drop the mic and say, there you go, it's done.
Get a short little phrase in there, but then it's just like, let's go.
Yep. This is what we get. This is what we can do. That's the kind of people I look towards and inspire me. People who I can see hitting home runs constantly and showing what they can do. I call it peacock. It's like peacock, showing your feathers to the world what you can do. Well,
fantastic. Gary, really, really appreciate you coming on to the show today and talking about your experience and sharing your wealth of knowledge with our guests here.
Thank you, Jared. Really appreciate it.